敵が来るぞ。ほら。立て直せ。援護するよ。この。
With each new entry, Final Fantasy seems to incrementally cement its position as the Simpsons of video games. A once great work of art that ceased to have relevance more than a decade ago and now simply appears regressive alongside other expressions that have used the foundation it built to progress and modernize. But that's not Final Fantasy's fault. Any work of art that isn't permitted the dignity of dying nobly atop the hill of its greatest victory will eventually fall to pieces. Creating a masterpiece of the medium inherently sets a bar for your work that will likely never be overtaken again. Look at Shakespeare post-Lear. The guy knew his focus was falling to pieces and made the brilliant move of putting a full stop on his own career with The Tempest. Square-Enix, however, will do no such thing, because Square is a corporation and not a person, no matter what Mitt Romney might tell you, and corporations don't give a fuck about dignity. If there's a chance it has blood in it, a company like Square will pulverize that stone. Now, we might not all agree on the numeral that denotes Final Fantasy's greatest installment, unless you believe it's 9, in which case you're absolutely right. But once we get past the launch window hype, I hope we will all agree that Final Fantasy XV isn't it. Sure, I haven't played the whole thing yet, but I don't have to finish a shit sandwich to know the parsley isn't going to help me choke it down. I honestly have no idea what the majority of my fellow reviewers are talking about when they reference it as a defining RPG of the generation. There's literally no idea contained within that hasn't appeared in another game to better effect. That's not to say I'm hating every moment of it, to the contrary. There are some interesting concepts at play in Square's latest approach to an open-world Final Fantasy, but every time I find something potentially enjoyable, it inevitably falls just short of feeling complete in its execution. A perfect example is the prominently featured Regalia, the conspicuously luxurious ride that no one seems to notice, which carries our rich fuckboys through the world of Eos.
ないわ。ないよな。ノクティス王子。
調子に乗りすぎたな。
しょうがないでしょ。
なんとも幸先の悪い。
グラディオ頼む。
なんだ。
一人で押してくれ。
It's an idea I almost like. In theory, it bridges the gap between past and present Final Fantasies by turning the Kingdom of Lucius into one giant world map with no loading in and out of combat zones and towns. Except there is plenty of loading in and out of towns and combat zones unless you want to waste hours of your time watching the Regalia drive from one location to the next with no content in between. The Regalia is a mildly interactive loading screen that you can only circumvent by watching an actual fucking loading screen. And the load times in this game are long, my friend. Eternal. And here, I think, is my biggest problem. An open-world Final Fantasy was already attempted to great effect way back in Final Fantasy XII, and yet this entry feels as if that game never existed. It literally ignores every lesson Square learned in its last attempt and replaces everything with a mechanic or system that is slower, more obtuse, or just downright less fun. There's plenty more to talk about, from 15's incomplete and staggeringly inept story, no surprise there for a Final Fantasy game, to its confusing and frustrating combat system that manages to be the worst parts of real-time and turn-based combat combined, to the inconsistent art direction that unsuccessfully attempts to fuse information age industrialism with boilerplate Euro fantasy, but it will all have to wait for the full review. In the meantime, know that this is not a defining RPG of the generation unless you outright ignore The Witcher 3, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Pillars of Eternity, Divinity Original Sin, Bloodborne, and a whole host of others that deserve that title long before something so incomplete and utterly tone-deaf should be allowed a seat at the guest table. Stay tuned for the full review on ludonarrativeassonance.com, and be sure to like and subscribe to show your support. Thank you.